Are you a fan of spiders? If so, you're kind of weird. That's a strange thing to be a fan of. Now, I'm not afraid of spiders, because I'm real. But I still wouldn't want to see one crawling around the house. Today, we're going to be checking out a video where someone made a game where you play as a spider.
Huh?
And it looks like walking around the house. So, I don't know. Let's check out the video and see what it looks like.
This is Arachnarun, a platformer where you play as a spider running away from a vacuum. And this is the story of how I made it.
Oh, that looks like Only. Yeah, he's selling me already.
It was the GMTK Game Jam. I had 48 hours to make and submit a game that fit the theme of role reversal. I entered the jam at the end of a 2-week episode of feeling rather tired and out of it, but I was excited to participate and hoped that finishing a small project would give me that boost that I needed to get back into the swing of things.
I feel like every time you take a break from game dev specifically, you need something to get your energy back up because there's just so much to keep in mind. A game jam is a good option for that sort of thing.
I had a number of ideas for the game, but I kept coming back to one in particular, a vacuum simulator, except you're the thing being vacuumed. And what's a creature that often finds itself being hunted by a vacuum? A spider. But something seemed oddly familiar about this premise, and it didn't take long for me to figure it out. But when I did, I was even more excited.
Okay.
That's right, I get to rip off Mario again. This is Dust.
Oh, is that Mario DS? Yeah, I don't remember this specific game, but the mini games on the Mario 64 DS were quite good.
Buddies, a mini game from Mario Party DS where you run from a vacuum and hurdle various obstacles in order to be the last one standing. I wanted to essentially remake the core of this game, but build on the foundation to create an even more exhilarating experience with twists and turns and platforming. Instead of a straight path along the floor, I wanted to tour the player around an entire house with different challenges in every room. I wanted the game to be an on-rails platformer. You'd still be able to move around the screen, but the overall path and camera movements would all be predetermined by your...
Oh, see, he didn't do us dirty. Don't worry, guys. Right away, the DVD logo hits the corner.
I figured Godot would have some tools to get me started, and it did. These are path nodes, which are mathematically defined curves that can be guided into different shapes using control points, and interpolated along by path follow nodes. In short, train track, train cart. And on my track were two carts, the player in front and the camera in the back. I had to fix some...
And so far, Godot looking pretty nice. I mean, looks like a game engine right now.
I had to fix some curve-related camera issues, but then it was time to make the player dance. One of the first things the movement code does is cancel out the movement of the cart, thereby making it appear as if the player isn't in the cart at all. And yet I can still easily limit the player's movement based on its local position to prevent the player from drifting off screen or taking an unintended route.
Okay, so I see. You are technically in control, but you're always going to be stuck within certain bounds. That's a unique way to keep it. It seems pretty similar to the Mario Kart minigame even, where technically you have control, but there's a lot of things being handled for you to keep the experience consistent.
It's movement based on its local position to prevent the player from drifting off screen or taking an unintended route and getting lost. The player will also face in the same direction as the parent cart, and when the player encounters an invisible curve in the road, they will naturally turn to follow it. This effect is amplified by placing the camera in a second cart slightly further behind, like sitting in the back of a roller coaster. This also emphasizes the theme, role reversal. By putting the vacuum model in the same cart as the camera, it implies that you're seeing the spider from the point of view of the vacuum, sort of a second-person perspective.
Yeah, that is kind of second person. I mean, if I were watching this gameplay without knowing, I might assume that you are playing as the vacuum. Okay, yeah, that is a pretty good job of hitting the roles reversed.
And with that, I had basic gameplay. For the visuals, I wanted to try a cel-shaded style. I soon came across Raphael Bordoni's awesome custom shader and downloaded the code. I didn't get the outlines working because I couldn't be bothered to read how to, but even without them, I think it looks pretty good. Spider time! 2 round segments, 8 stick legs. I made a basic gradient texture, aligned the UVs, and went through a number of different color combinations before settling on this violet blue. I wanted to make the eyes relatable, but not overly cutesy. Spiders have 8 eyes, and while I could have just lowered the number to make it look more human, I decided to instead shape the eyes to convey emotion, while still looking spidery. I made the first
I mean 8 eyes still a little creepy, but
set of eyes small, like little nostrils. I made the second and third set pretty straightforward, and with the last set, I went for a thinner, angled eyebrow shape. Did I make a concerned looking spider? I think I did. When I started animating,
like
I
it.
had no understanding of spider movement, beyond it being kind of creepy and laggy. But I found a wonderful video that broke it down, the dynamics of each pair of legs and how it all
Dude, I'm surprised that he did all this for the game jam. I guess that for a game like this, the spider movement is about half of the game. The actual platforming is pretty simple because it's on rails. But even still, this is a lot of time spent up front just modeling a spider and making sure the walk animations look right.
But I found a wonderful video that broke it down, the dynamics of each pair of legs and how it all joins together. I didn't spend a lot of time animating it, and if you look at each pair of legs individually, it does look a little off, but altogether, it's pretty good.
Need the butt to jiggle though. That is a
Can't forget the butt
necessity
jiggle.
right now.
And with the spider modeled and animated, I began my search for music on opengameart.org. There, I found a song called Countdown to Myocardial Infarction. Apparently, this is a track.
That is like the definition of doing too much. You did too much, my friend. Tone it down.
Apparently, this is a track from Reimagine the Game that was released for anyone to use. So, I used it in my game, and it fits the action pretty well. The beginning of the song really began to shine once I paired it with a cutscene. Not inspired by anything in particular, of course. Now, this is very much a summary of what happened. And in all honesty, the game had been progressing rather slowly thanks to my sluggish and inconsistent work ethic. At this point, it was 4 in the morning on the last day. I was pulling an all-nighter and had to model a vacuum. Despite my encroaching delirium, I ended up with this thing, which, ugly as it is, still manages to...
I mean, it looks like a vacuum. I don't know. Like, it communicates what it needs to communicate in a 2-day game jam.
resemble a vacuum.
Good enough to me.
And then I modeled the obstacles. Popcan with soda pop label,
There we go.
book by Arthur, and Cheesies. There are only a few hours remaining, and I didn't even have a basic level set up, so I imported what I had.
We don't have a game yet, but I guess we're only a third of the way through the video. I'll give you that. I want to see the game-making part of Godot here.
I had to get something made before my brain totally fizzled out. Mesh, textures, cell-shaded materials. I coded the objects to get vacuumed. Collisions, collision layers, scaling. Finally, I had some stuff to work with. I threw it together in a scene and put together the best level I could muster. Pile of Cheetos, books, a stack of pop cans, and a little spiral platforming section. I submitted the game in the last hour and passed out. So that was my submission. Cool opening cutscene, background music, and a flat floor with a few random props tossed about. The game wasn't as complete as I would have liked, but to be fair to myself... Nah, I couldn't be fair to myself. If this was my first game jam, sure, but even compared to other projects that I made in 48 hours, this was pretty bad. And it was entirely my fault. No beating around the bush. Despite my goal of dedicating my undivided attention to this project, my weekend effort was spent mostly zoning out or sleeping, with the occasional hour-long burst of effort here and there. By the time I got my act together, it was too late, and this was the best I could manage. But I wasn't willing to leave it that way, as some abandoned dump. This game could be so much more. I knew that. And not just because Dust Buddies was so much more. This game could be so much more in its own unique way, if it was actually given the time. In Dust Buddies, you walk in a straight line across some buttons and fabric, and that's it. It's awesome. It's one of my favorite minigames, but I wanted my game to be bigger. I wanted corners, curves, platforms, weird obstacles. I wanted to take the player beyond the floor on a tour of an entire house. I wanted to take this thing that was too basic to even be called a cheap clone and make it something special.
See, all I'm thinking of is this reminded me of Micro Machines. Loved that game as a kid. Micro Machines on the N64. I love the vision. I love the drive. I want to see what this turns out to be because this is sounding good.
This was my plan. A house with 5 distinct furnished...
Also, I didn't think my handwriting could be matched for badness, but this man, I think I would win a 1v1.
Finished rooms, and a myriad of obstacles corresponding to each one. I would dedicate the next week just to making models, and the following week to finishing the game.
Let's go.
Surprise, surprise, both weeks took double the time. Table, chairs, toilet, sink.
Right. I 100% know what he's talking about. I'm working on a similar game dev video right now, which go ahead and subscribe if you want to check that out. And I was hoping that it would take me about a week to do the development, and I'm on week 3 right now. That's just the way the cookie crumbles, especially when you're trying to make games for YouTube specifically.
Fork, knife, spoon, egg, sponge, tire, ducky, couch, cutting board, coffee table, comic book, whisk. Just to name a few of the many things that I worked on over the next 2 weeks.
the models look
Should
pretty
I have
decent.
just bought an asset pack online? Yeah, but was it worth doing it myself? No, but I still learned a lot. I made some cool discoveries and came up with some neat
I know that
solutions to
feeling.
different problems along the way. The shower curtains are one flat plane, but they have a wavy look to them, and that's all thanks to an art program that I used in kindergarten. There's an effect called metal, and it lets you draw this quote-unquote metal texture. And layering this on a polka dot pattern created the desired effect. When
Now
applying
that is a clever solution. There we go. We're getting into some real game dev. You're not developing a game if you're not cheating. You have to cheat somewhere, and most of the time you have to cheat almost everywhere. I love it.
When applying a carpet texture, I came across a different problem. The texture I found had the perfect look, but it didn't tile. A quick Google search for make texture seamless led me to this miracle of a site that does it for you. It works phenomenally, and it makes it really easy to make textures out of
That
whatever
looks
photos
good.
I have around. My
Let's
pipeline for creating
go.
pretty much every object was this. I'd gather some reference and throw it in PureRef, create an approximation of the shape and make smaller changes from there. I would then add materials, maybe paint on some textures, and then I was
Go.
done. Sometimes I would do fun things, like make a duck almost entirely using metaballs, or make a whisk that utilizes a transparent plane for its loops, or take a 3D scan of my favorite Webkins. Every 3D model I used was made by me.
Instead of your favorite Webkins? How old are you, my Dougie? My younger siblings were on Webkins, but I was way too old when those things came around. Maybe I'm just too old.
Every 3D model I used was made by me. At some point, I downloaded a
go.
jerrycan from OpenGameArt just so that I could take a texture and remix it for my own jerrycan model. I spent weeks making all this stuff. And the kicker? A lot of it either isn't visible or didn't make it into the game.
See, and that is why, me personally, I don't like to spend a ton of time on model work, especially for things that are already made, because the part that's super unique about your game most of the time comes in development, like writing the software, doing the game design, and doing iterations there. Obviously, it has to look good. It has to look a certain level of good, but hey, as long as building up skills, no problem with that. Having fun with it, no problem with that, but this is why I would probably not spend so much of the time on modeling, because we're still we're like 8 minutes into the video and we still have gone so little over the gameplay of the game. Like, how would this actually play? Or even, how would this look to play?
Speaking of which, it was time to import everything, and right there was when it clicked in my head just how much work finishing this game would be. Modeling is a slow process, but
Yes.
setting up each and every one of those assets in-game was far more arduous. I had to set the export settings for each bun file, import each asset individually, and test it.
Already, this is one check mark I'm seeing against Godot. Unity works directly with Blender files. You don't have to do all this.
Import each asset individually and test that everything
I mean, depending on how he wants to use it, this is also going to be a problem, because you see this, that box on the outside is the collision box, so if your spider tries to jump on the couch, it's going to jump onto the invisible wall floating over the couch.
exported correctly. Set the node type, add materials, add textures, write scripts for
looks good,
specific
though.
behaviors. Each of them needed a custom collision solution and a custom visibility notifier solution so that they would be deleted when off screen. Scaling, custom sound effects, so much manual implementation for item after item after item. It had been several weeks since the jam, and I was feeling pretty impatient with this project. It had become clear that despite all my efforts, if I wanted this game to meet my original vision, I would have to do a lot more. Walls, lights, appliances,
it'd
furniture,
be.
decor. At the pace I was going, it would probably take a few weeks to get it all done. A very dull and repetitive few weeks. I was feeling a lot better than I had been during the jam, and just wanted to move on from this project and work on something else.
I know
So
that
just like
feeling.
that, I said, forget my original vision. I'll clean up what I've got, put together a simple, straightforward level to show off some of the obstacles, and then I'm done. And I can move on. Just like that, my goal had changed from expand upon Dust Buddies to just remake the dang thing. There's nothing wrong with that. With this change in mindset, the dull dread began to wash away and my excitement returned. I could make a decent little clone, that didn't seem so bad, and that's probably what my goal should have been for the original jam. Of course I wasn't.
Yeah, because the whole, the rail platformer thing with the multiple levels that reminded me of Only Up, that looked really cool. It also seemed really complicated for 2 days for a solo guy. If he had a team of people where he could just focus on the modeling, or he could just focus on the implementation, maybe. But this does look a lot more attainable for one person, even if you're taking a month to do it. Because this is basically just like an endless runner, but you're running away from a vacuum as a spider. not that hard.
Of course I wasn't going to create an entire roller coaster through a house in 2 days. Could I have gotten a lot more done than I did? For sure, but not that. I began putting together a level with all of this in mind. I tilted the camera down to hide the background and laid out a level to follow in a straight path. I carefully considered how much of the floor would be visible and how far left and right the player could actually go, and laid things out in a way that was fun to navigate without being too contrived. With my new goal in mind, there wasn't a whole lot that I had left to do. There was something freeing about that. But despite this new goal, I found myself making changes. The jam game, for all it lacked, did at least have some twists and turns, and even a section where you climb up a spiral book staircase.
That looks cool.
So I at least had to have something like that. Just a few turns to make it interesting. And from there I thought, well, since we're climbing this coffee table anyway, might as well stay up here and climb around on the couch as well. And since we're climbing on a couch, might as well climb up to the kitchen counter too. And so the level continued to evolve. I had all these props for a bathroom, so I figured I might as well use them. And even though I didn't have enough furniture for a whole house, I could at least hint at certain themes. With my expectations lowered, each of these additions suddenly felt super valuable, and the prospect of creating them had become exciting again. Instead of every addition falling short of my goal, it exceeded it. It's the classic under-promise, over-deliver, but I had done it to myself. For each room, I'd start by placing just enough objects to create a path for the player to traverse. Then, I'd fill the room with garbage. Once in a while, I'd have a specific design idea, but for the most part, I was just scattering stuff all over. I made tons of tweaks and changes as I went along. I reprogrammed most of the physics objects because of poor performance. I made more models such as a TV, kitchen appliances, and a garage door. I changed animations, reworked lights, and recorded sound effects. I went from spending a few hours a day slowly and painfully pushing through the slog, groaning at the sheer amount of work left, to putting in almost all of my waking hours, filled with excitement about this little project, and feeling accomplished when I realized how much I had done. Just a week after deciding to axe my original vision, I had brought it to fruition. I had some people playtest it, made some adjustments, and then I was done. I had recreated Dust Buddies and put my own spin on it. It had fewer features, less polish, and more bugs, of course, but I was happy with the result.
I mean, you're playing as a spider, so before you wise Alex are going to come in the comments and say, actually, a spider's not a bug. I was just going to say spider eats bugs, okay? That was all. But anyway, the joke feels dead, okay? Thank you.
This game was supposed to take me 2 days to complete, but instead, it took me over a month. But you know what? I think it's one of my best games yet. So even though I keep finding myself underestimating how long a project is going to take, and trust me, I find it more frustrating than you do, and it's not something I take pride in, I think my games are getting better. So was it worth spending over a month on this thing? I don't know. You tell me. I'm gonna go work on something else now.
I'm just saying, you got Lazy in your name, but you actually got the video out. Shout out to Lazy Alarm. This game actually looks pretty cool. I love the way that he approached it and the way that he transformed a game that he remembered loving into something better. That is very cool. Again, we're working on something actually kind of similar right now. Subscribe so you can check it out when we drop it. I'm gonna leave a link to his video in the description and up on the screen as well. Didn't teach me a lot about Godot specifically, but I mean, it looks like Godot's usable to make something at least of this level, so I'll definitely have to give it a go. Anyway, if you're watching this far, thank you. We really appreciate you guys watching these videos, and we'll see you later.